actually, I'm the co-author of this paper, okay, and that's okay, because Dr. Lee went to the emergency last night and still in the hospital because he has a very quite serious diarrhea and vomiting, okay. And actually, I have a long research relationship with Dr. Lee. We have been working several papers since we were in Edinburgh. Both of us were alumni of University of Edinburgh. And actually the first paper was related to lottery. Okay. But today I'm talking about something else, smartphone. So before I start, may I ask how many people have smartphone? Please raise your hand. Okay, so we have about 30 or 40%. Okay. Which is a percentage quite high. So Dr. Lee and I, we come up with the ideas that whether smartphone is really useful in our life. Okay, since we rely on it so much, and there will be some negative consequences like addiction, maybe, or compulsive usage, or sometimes we say techno stress. The more you use, the more stressful you actually get, but you just don't realize. So we feel this is actually a fantastic timing to analyze the research that. And actually a few months ago, we have some Korean scholars, which are also our co-authors for this in future. They are collecting Korean data. And I found that both of them use Apples instead of Samsung. Okay, I don't know why. But and they feel quite proud about their addiction to iPhone. Actually, they say, I'm very addicted to iPhone. So I feel that previously, when we say someone is addicted to something, we actually feel quite embarrassed or feel quite negative. But right now, even the university scholars feel proud about themselves, about the addiction. So I feel it's really worth to talk about that. So this is, I just provide 3 quotations from people. They say 3 objects are considered essential across all participants, cultures and genders. What are they? Keys, money, and mobile phone. Okay. Then another one, cell phone dependency is now called compulsive communicating. So compulsive usage is not a new term, but people don't feel comfortable and they really want to get rid of the term, but they are still in trouble. Okay. The third one, okay, it's about, some people said about the opinion. Say, at the time I hated the iPhone, but that was only before I used one for the first time. So actually using those devices change people's behavior a lot. So this is basically agenda. This is a quantitative research, very different from the first one. Okay, and so I'm going to talk about some conceptual background and the related hypothesis, and talk about the data results, and point out the major findings, and finally limitations and directions for future research. So basically a quick introduction. Well, we all know iPhone's popularity. And basically, so far, the penetration rate is estimated to be 60% by 2015. And actually, in Taiwan, now the penetration rate is about 40%. Okay, so it's very, very high. And we will actually, I want to use a few photos instead of the verbal description. You can see that even mom likes to use the smartphone, and young people, of course, when they gather together, they use smartphone together, okay, instead of chatting with each other. Okay, so it seems that it's weird when we eat with somebody. Okay, we go to lunch or dinner, they put their iPhones, okay, when they talk. Okay, so it's very common. And we also find that before smartphone, people are addicted to computer. But actually now, people try to look at their smartphone every 3 to 5 minutes, even when they was asleep, when they are dating, or when they are at home with children. So you can see that those signals could be used as the indicators of stress. So what is stress? Are you feel stressful? Okay. Sometimes it's really hard to measure, right? So our future research is to think about like a blood pressure, use more physical measures instead of the self-report. Okay, but so far at this stage, we prefer to use some self-report data. So we consider compulsive usage and techno stress. This has been 2 terms identified in some related areas, that how to describe people's reliance or over dependence. And the other one is about techno-threat. It is actually from more OB study, organizational behavior study. They talk about that when people use new technology in their organizations, they actually becomes more stressful. But we actually think about that in individual behavior, especially in consumer behavior. Actually, it could be true. So we come up with a few hypotheses. Actually, we wanted to analyze a few psychographic differences. The first one is about locus of control. It's a very important psychographic difference. And as we all know that we can classify people with internal locus of control, or we can classify people with more external locus of control. The big difference is whether people believe they can control their destiny or not, or they can control their fate, or they can attribute the cause to internal or external. So this is something common when people are successful. They usually attribute to their hard work. But if they fail, they actually attribute to bad luck, something like this. So actually, we feel that if people have stronger tendency on external locus control, it means that because they feel they are not able to deal with that easily. So the more they use, the more stressful they may become, later stage. The second one is about social anxiety. Social anxiety is definitely an important factor because social anxiety is about how people feel the nervousness with other people when they interact. So some people actually don't really want to have interaction, and especially after mobile phone, it becomes very true because people prefer texting, instead of calling. And right now we have smartphones, so people can use some social network. So instead of making phone calls nowadays, so we actually feel that more people, the tendency of social anxiety may be an influential factor in deciding the possibility of suffering from stress. Need for touch actually is a consumer behavior research factor. So that is why I like to cooperate with Dr. Lee. I'm from Department of Business Management and I'm working on consumer psychology. And that was actually one of the factors we feel important for consumer. Do you like to touch something before you buy? Especially grocery shopping in the supermarket? Or some people just like to touch people's shoulder or hands when they try to interact. So some people, the need for touch actually will lead to satisfaction. The more they touch, they feel the more satisfied they get from the product or from the relationship. So actually, we feel, especially nowadays, smartphone. How do we use smartphone? You don't have to press any button, right? You just need to use your pointers. So even like my 4-year-old kid, he is better than using this device than me, and he feels very natural. Once he points out his pointers, he becomes a very magical Superman, controlling the whole world. So we actually feel that the more tendency of the need for control, actually they will become more dependent on the smartphone and the phone itself, and then they might lead to the more stress. Materialism is also a more psychographic difference in consumer behavior. And the definition of materialism is that how people feel materialism is important, material is important, and there are a lot of factors related to materialism. For example, how you grew up and what kind of family structure and childhood experiences, but we are not talking about more than that. But basically, it's about the tendency, how you feel that material can be satisfactory to your life. So of course, we feel that smartphone is nice, it's not cheap. So the more materials than you have, actually you would like to have something like this. You will feel it's your ownership. You can actually feel it's more like your territory, your feelings that controlling something like this. So we also interested in compare smartphone users and traditional phone users. So this is how we predict. And for smartphone users, actually we found that we did a lot of preliminary studies, more like interviews or qualitative research. We find that people actually use smartphone more frequently than using the traditional mobile phone. Okay, and so we actually try to believe that the duration of smartphone actually will have positive relationship of a person's traits. The final one, okay, that's this one, okay. Now move it back. So two related hypotheses. One is to compare traditional mobile phone with smartphone users. The other one is about the duration effect. So this is a method. We collected 483 participants through internet and also some social networks. Okay. And we did a little bit analysis to make sure these two groups didn't show any significance before we combine the data. And we got 46% of smartphone users. So you can actually see it's almost like 50-50. Okay? And the demographics are a little bit different, but I'm not going to go through the more details. And in our previous draft, okay, we tried to use the very traditional regression models to deal with that. But actually, we weren't happy about the results because you all know that the traditional regression has many disadvantages. So we decided to go for a more sophisticated quantitative approaches, SEM, structural equation modeling, after we deliver the draft. Okay. But right now the data is still cleaning. It has been a long way to go. But let's just show you a few important findings. Okay. This is a measurement models just to show that the measurements are quite fine because most of the measures are adopted from previous research or we make a little bit revisions. But actually, okay, so the measurements of controls can be reliable. Okay. And let's move on to the structural model. Okay. So this structural model combines with 4 factors as the causes and then 2 results, techno stress and the composite usage. But right now we are working on some competing model, which I'm not going to present, okay, because competing models may come up with better results, but we need some better arguments for that. Okay, but so far this is overall data, so you can actually see locus of control and the materialism, okay, and the techno stress to composite usage. The model fit is good, okay, so far. But we wanted to separate 2 groups because we are interested to see the behavior, the differences between smartphone users and traditional phone users. So this is what we get. So the numbers you see, the front one is the smartphone users, the later one is the traditional mobile phone users. Okay, so this is what we actually see. You can see the locus of control, they have very consistent patterns. So it supposes the H1, okay, and external locus of control with positive influence on the composite usage and also techno stress. More interesting is about the social anxiety. Okay, to the smartphone users, it has positive influence, but for the traditional users, it has negative ones. I talk about that later, more elaboration. Why is that about? Okay, and unfortunately, need for touch doesn't show any significant. However, in our previous linear model, regression model, it was significant. But we are trying to justify why these 2 methods come up with the different results. We are still working on. Okay, and the materialism showed a very consistent patterns that both of the groups are positive related to the techno stress and the composite usage. Okay, so make a quick conclusions. H1 and H4 were supported. H2 were partially supported because one comes with the negative results, and H3 was not supported. So we further ANOVA's analysis of variance to compare with these 2 groups. So what we actually found that for the composite usage or techno stress, smartphone users, the mean values are higher than the traditional phone users. Okay. Another one, okay, is about the duration. So we actually classify people who use smartphone recently. Okay, they are actually the new users, less than 6 months, or they use them more than 6 months as a classification. And we also found that the more they use, okay, the higher results they get in the handle stress and also the compulsive usage. So let's come up with some important findings in plain English. So this is what we actually found out. Okay, so important factors, for example, external local control and the material is no doubt to be included. And for the social anxiety, it's very interesting. Okay, we spent quite a lot of time thinking about why one is negative, one is positive. Okay, for the smartphone, okay, it means that the more social anxiety you get, the higher stressful you will become. I would think that because right now the smartphone, the program, so the applications are so different from the one we use for traditional. Because, for example, you can connect to Facebook, you can connect to a lot of social network, you can use many ways to interact with your friends. So it means that the more diversified of those channels we provide actually may increase because since they are not comfortable working with people. But the more device you provide, maybe the more stressful they become. Okay. However, the traditional mobile phones it can save your trouble. Okay, because you don't want to talk, you just simply text. Okay, I think that is a very quick alternative to solve the problem. Okay, so the final two is about the smartphone users are more likely to suffer, okay, from compulsive usage and handle stress. Okay, we have some limitations because we are still working on better measurements on social anxiety, okay, because social anxiety is a very important construct. However, the measurements related to social anxiety are very different, okay, depending on what kind of content, social context, and also consumer behavior context. And also, as I mentioned, we have some research collaboration with Korean people and also Japanese institutions. So we are collecting Japanese and Korean data right now, and we plan to collect future about US data. So that will be very interesting to talk about the cultural differences. And the final one, we are actually in big troubles about stress, because what is stress? Okay, when you say someone you are stressful, but you say no, I don't feel that. Okay, so self-report measures could be problematic. Okay, so we really want to use something more objective in future, or maybe use more measures simultaneously, how to see whether, and then answer this important question, whether smartphone is stress-inducing or stress-releasing or not. Okay, so this is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the fine paper. I would like to offer 3 cents of comment. Let me start off by saying that I'm not a smartphone user. I don't even like to have a mobile phone, but being new to this country, I have to have one due to the fact that I don't speak the Chinese language, in spite of the fact that I am Chinese. So, 3 basic comments. The first one concerns the overall aim of this study, and I would like to go here in the very beginning. To investigate whether smartphones are good for stress relief. So my question to our presenter here and her colleagues is, why do you even make this move? I mean, why conduct this investigation to evaluate what is, in my mind, claims advanced by the marketing departments of the smartphone industry? What is the importance or the significance of, trashing or rejecting the sales pitch of smartphone industry? I don't know. I mean, I have to scratch my head to ask myself. I don't use it, and people who don't use smartphone really just don't care about stress relief or stress reduction. So I'm not entirely convinced that the investigator of this study have made the arguments, at least to my satisfaction. Why should an independent observer such as myself care about the basic aim of this study? So the question I have, the first question is, why should any consumer care about the claims of the salespeople of the smartphone industry, I think in general, as a smart shopper, not a smartphone user, but smart shopper, I buy or not buy a smartphone owing to my rational calculations that I make myself. For example, price, quality, and sometimes what is called the cool factor. You know, having an iPhone by Apple is probably a cool thing. So I buy it because I want to be cool with my friends and colleagues, and even neighbors. So, as a smart shopper, I could not care less about the promotion materials of sellers, such as smartphone sellers. So that's comment number one. Comment number two, I'm not entirely sure about the causal mechanisms of the study here. And that is basically the chicken and the egg conundrum. What is the cause and what is the effect? I'm at a loss at what is being explained and what is doing the explaining. So for example, let me read a passage here. This is one example. Materialistic mobile phone users who value more on material possessions and financial success are likely to consider mobile phone a material possession and the center of their lives. This centrality and preference of possession induce usage, duration, and frequency, and most important of all, the stress hereafter, especially when the mobile phone are powerful and multifunctional. Okay. So I'm not entirely sure which way the arrow is pointing. That is not clear to me. Why do mobile phone users have this preference for materialistic things? Does this preference cause stress in the user? If it is preference that is the cause, right? This initial preference people have for materialistic things, then stress, in my mind, seems to be the effect. Does this stress reinforce the mobile phone user's preference, initial preference? If so, how does stress reinforce that, or even relate to the user's initial preference? So that's my second comment, the causal mechanism relating to what is causing what. Third comment is, and I think it was up on one of the slides earlier, the demographics, the populations. How representative is the survey of the general population? And on page 13 of the paper I have, so I'll just read again to refresh our memories. An exception was that the sample, I presume, sample of the study appeared slightly more educated and contained more females than the population from which it was drawn. Overall, 60% of participants were female, and an age range of 16 to 67 of the sample, 80% had achieved a college diploma or higher. 10% of the participants never changed their mobile phone during the past 2 years. 38% changed once, and 35% changed twice. 46% of the participants use smartphones. Among them, approximately 44 have used it less than 6 months. 27 have used more than 1 year. Okay. So again, what are the results? I mean, can these results be taken at face value for the rest of the populations? I'm not entirely sure. And what are the fully worked out implications of stress-inducing for people who use smartphone and for people who don't use it, such as myself? The question that came to my mind was, do we avoid, right, people like me, who are smart shoppers, not smartphone users? So do we avoid smartphones altogether, or do we learn to use smartphone now in order to minimize and reduce stress and social anxiety, fear, and all the technical stuff relating to using smartphone? So these questions came to my mind as I was commenting and discussing the paper. I would appreciate some response. Thank you.